are substantive reasons why folks were a little hesitant about Christine O'Donnell as a candidate in the first place. So we've got this coming catastrophe, right? We've got this incredible confluence of events around this woman's campaign. Republicans all falling all over themselves to get in line and endorse her as the new Senate candidate, the new Palin-esque star. And the unstoppable flood now of information about who exactly it is that they are endorsing and how she has made her political living.
Tea Party sensation of the moment, and so far the campaign. Delaware's GOP senatorial nominee Christine O'Donnell. Tonight she's sharing a candidates forum with her Democratic opponent, Chris Coons, in Wilmington. And longtime supporter Sarah Palin gave her some free advice about only talking to friendly media. Watch.
She's going to have to dismiss that, go with her gut, get out there, speak to the American people, speak through Fox News, and let the independents who are tuning into you, let them know what it is that she stands for, the principles behind her positions.
It used to be that new candidates were advised to brush up on the issues so they could handle questions from anyone, even tough questions. The idea behind that was that it prepared you also for actually governing. But now the advice to candidates is only to talk to sympathetic reporters. Nevada's Sharon Angle also has a history of walking or even sometimes running away from unwanted questions. Something Christine O'Donnell hasn't done so well when confronted with facts. Gary Tuckman's been doing some digging for us on another facet of the money theme, crunching the numbers on how the candidate spent some of the dollars from her last campaign. Gary, what have you learned?
Well, Christine O'Donnell, Anderson, speaking at a candidates forum here in Wilmington, Delaware tonight, says America cannot spend its way to recovery. But tonight, major questions about her spending. At the very least, the questions are troubling. At the very most, she might have violated election laws. We have documents right here that show Christine O'Donnell spent a lot of money on what appears to be personal effects, and it wasn't during a campaign, and it was campaign money. The spending of this money occurred 3 months after she lost to Joe Biden in 2008, a year before she announced she was going to run as a candidate in 2010. Now, the FEC, the Federal Election Commission, allows you to spend money after a campaign to retire debt, but not to add to the debt. And she has lots of debt from 2008, which troubles a lot of people. They think it's hypocritical because she wants America to spend what it has. But let us show you some of these checks. You can decide for yourself if she should have written these checks from her campaign money. For example, a check for $475, she labeled it as mileage reimbursement. Remember, this is 3 months after the campaign is over. This means she drove hundreds of miles, and she submitted this with campaign funding. Also, $157 on a phone bill from Verizon Wireless. By all indications, this is her personal phone. Also, $28 at a gas station. The gas station in the town where she's originally from, Moorestown, New Jersey. She still has family there. This is campaign money. There's no campaign going on. $600 for her utility bill paid to Delmarva Power. Also, they're little piddly expenses, but again, increasing her debt. And these are very telltale. You wouldn't need to spend this for any campaign, let alone a campaign that's not going on anymore. $19 at a place called the Pike Lanes. The Pike Lanes is a bowling alley. That would pay for about 8 games of bowling. Also, $26 for a meal at Ruby Tuesday's restaurant. Campaign money once again. And then she even used campaign money for a $2.84 charge at Staples. In addition, she paid rent money with her campaign funding. Now, the home that she lives in right now, the townhome, doubles as her campaign headquarters. She lives there sometime, so do her campaign workers. But this money for her rent was paid during a time when she was no longer in a campaign. Now, we can tell you that her detractor says she does this because she hasn't had a real job for years. She has no source of income. She needs to live on campaign money. Of course, we wanted to talk to her about it. I talked to one of her top aides face-to-face last night. I said, we had a lot to ask her about. He said, she's too tired to talk to you. Try to talk to her tomorrow. Send us a request. We sent a request. We heard nothing. I saw her today at the campaign forum, asked if we could talk to her. Her aide said she, again, did not want to talk. We've talked to some employees of hers who quit. They say they were not paid money they were owed, and they're very angry that she has spent so much money on charges like we just read to you, Anderson. We were talking about former employees, Anderson. This is important. Today we talked to a former financial advisor who worked for the campaign for 2 months, and he said he had to quit as a financial advisor because he was aghast at what he saw.
She would withdraw money for mileage. She doesn't own a car, didn't own a car at the time, and you can only do one or the other, take a mileage expense or gas. She was doing both.
So this is after, she's not even running for anything anymore.
No. She should have been paying anything left over, and anything that came back in should have been paying off debt. None of that.
But she was using it to go bowling.
Yeah.
As a campaign expense.
Yeah. And
but there was no campaign.
And paying rent.
Paying her rent with it.
Yeah.
Gary, there's also been a lot of questions raised about her college record. What have you learned about that?
She was very much stressed throughout her life that it's never proper to lie, that you should always tell the truth. But many people who know her, many people who used to work with her, say they've always assumed she was a college graduate because she told them she was a college graduate. She went to Fairleigh Dickinson University in Bergen County, New Jersey in the 1980s. Well, it turns out she wasn't a college graduate. Just this summer, she graduated college. She had to take an additional course. There were apparently some financial issues, but she had been saying, according to many people, she was a college graduate, and it turns out that she wasn't. Also, another issue that comes to the credibility factor, her last job that we know of was in 2004. It was for a conservative think tank here in Wilmington, a publisher. And she ended up getting fired from that job, and she wasn't happy she was fired. She ended up suing them, claiming gender discrimination, and suing them for $6.9 million. Now, the reason why that's relevant, when the case was eventually dropped, she dropped the lawsuit. Don't know why. She dropped the lawsuit. She did say she couldn't afford it, but we don't know if there's more to it. The reason it's significant, though, is there's so many people, particularly conservative Republicans, particularly people in the Tea Party, who are aghast at our legal system and that people sue for so much money, and she sued for $6.9 million. As far as the people at that conservative institute, they say they can't talk on camera because they don't want to stir up a legal hornet's nest, but they do imply she's lying, not telling the truth. Their quote to us, they gave us one quote, they said, "The good reputation of the institute stands for itself."
And who during all this time was the treasurer of her campaign?
Well, this is really interesting. Under FEC laws, you must have a treasurer when you're spending campaign money. And according to the FEC documents that we've investigated, for 13 months between July 2009 and between August 2010, while she was spending money, there was no treasurer. The treasurer was Christine O'Donnell. That appears to have violated FEC laws, but the FEC has to determine that. Now, why haven't they determined that yet? Here's what has to happen. There has to be an investigation, and we've just been informed that a nonpartisan watchdog group called the Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington is filing a complaint this Monday with the FEC about all the information and more that we just told you about. Anderson.
Gary, appreciate the reporting. Thanks. Let's bring in the...
And that brings us to what remains, I am stunned to say, what remains the great, unacknowledged, big, honking policy issue in this year's elections nationwide. We're now able to add yet another Republican Senate nominee to the roster of truly radical anti-abortion crusading candidates in this year's elections. Now, just being anti-abortion is almost mandatory for Republican candidates across the board these days as the party continues its purge of its moderates. But what we have this year is beyond just being anti-abortion. There are now at least 5 Republican Senate nominees, 5, who not only think that the government should outlaw abortion nationwide, they think there should be no exceptions made for anybody who's the victim of incest or who's the victim of rape.
How do you feel about abortion? Are you for abortion, against abortion? If you're for it, in what instances would you allow for abortion?
I am pro-life, and I'll answer the next question. I don't believe in the exceptions of rape or incest.
Is there any reason at all for an abortion?
Not in my book.
So in others, rape and incest would not be something?
You know, I'm a Christian.
Right.
And I believe that God has a plan and a purpose for each one of our lives, and that He can intercede in all kinds of situations, and we need to have a little faith in many things.
I'm not sure what you're supposed to have faith in, that you can get an illegal abortion if the government makes it legal, it makes it illegal, that God will help you in some other way. I don't know what you're supposed to have faith in, but that was Republican Senate candidate Sharon Engel of Nevada. Before her, we heard from Republican Senate candidate Ken Buck of Colorado, both putting themselves down in the no exceptions category when it comes to reproductive rights. Then there's Republican Senate candidate Rand Paul of Kentucky. Back in February, Rand Paul told the Kentucky Right to Life Association that he opposes abortion even in the cases of rape or incest. Earlier this month, Republican Senate candidate Joe Miller of Alaska was added to the list. Miller has described himself as unequivocally pro-life, including cases of rape and incest. And now we have Republican Senate candidate Christine O'Donnell of Delaware. Her campaign confirming to us today that she opposes abortion in all cases, including rape and incest. Until recently, the position that those 5 Republican Senate nominees have, until recently that was considered a fringe position, even in the anti-abortion movement. Even super pro-life politicians, almost as a standard disclaimer, would say that women who are pregnant because of a rape or pregnant because of incest should be allowed an exemption, even as they wanted to make all other abortions illegal. That exemption is apparently now over. What these Republican candidates are talking about is the federal government not only monitoring every pregnancy in the country to ensure that it ends the way the government prefers, which is a live birth, but they're also saying that the government should force rape victims. The government should force rape victims under pain of criminal prosecution to give birth to their rapist's baby.
Well, in just a few days, Delaware's Republican senatorial nominee Christine O'Donnell has gone from virtual unknown to campaign sensation to Sarah Palin-style political celebrity. She spoke this afternoon to the Values Voters Summit in Washington.
Will they attack us? Yes. Will they smear our backgrounds and distort our records? Undoubtedly. Will they lie about us, harass our families, name call, and try to intimidate us? They will. There's nothing safe about it. But is it worth it? Well, let me ask you. Is freedom worth it? Is America worth it? Are those unalienable rights worth a little alienation from the Beltway popular crowd? I say yes, 1,000 times yes.
Well, she's talking about smears and distortions, and certainly a lot of liberals in the media are going after her, making fun of her, attacking her. All we care about, though, tonight are facts. There's nothing partisan about it. We've done a lot of segments on allegations against Democrats, Charlie Rangel, recently about Eddie Bernice Johnson, and other Republicans as well. So with that said, we learned today that a nonpartisan group, the Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, are calling for the U.S. Attorney in Delaware to launch a criminal investigation into Ms. O'Donnell's finances. I want to bring in Melanie Sloan, who's the group's executive director. So why are you calling for a criminal investigation?
We went through Ms. O'Donnell's campaign finance records, and we've talked to one of her former campaign aides, someone you, in fact, had on last night, David Keegan. And it turns out Ms. O'Donnell has treated her campaign funds like they're her very own personal piggy bank. She has used that money to pay things like her rent, for gas, meals, and even a bowling outing. And that's just flat out illegal.
But, I mean, we had the checks on the program last night, and it's, a couple $100 here, a couple $100 there. Does it really amount to much of anything?
Well, by our count, it amounts to well over $20,000 in 2009 and 2010, and that's just the funds that we can look at as clearly illegal. The fact is the Federal Election Commission needs to do an audit to find out all of the expenses that Ms. O'Donnell has claimed as campaign-related, because it may well be that most of them aren't. For example, in 2009, Ms. O'Donnell wasn't a candidate for anything, yet she had numerous campaign expenses, things like travel and gas, and yet she had no actual campaign.
We called, obviously, her spokesperson for comment. We didn't get a response back from them. We haven't heard back from them yet. Obviously, we still continue to welcome that. What is the likelihood what happened? You've called for an investigation. What does that actually mean? What is the next step? And how long, if the U.S. Attorney decided to do this, how long would something like that take?
Well, it's hard to say. We're going to be sending him a letter on Monday, and we're filing a complaint there and with the Federal Election Commission. We're saying that Ms. O'Donnell committed the crime of conversion by abusing her campaign funds for personal use. She made false statements on the form she filed with the Federal Election Commission when she lied about some of her campaign expenditures. And then she likely committed tax evasion by failing to declare the income from the campaign funds as personal income, since she used it for personal expenses. So the U.S. Attorney should start investigating. The FEC should investigate.
Those of her supporters who no doubt will say, well, look, this is just a smear. This is just, a liberal group from Washington trying to, tarnish her because she's now, in the running.
Well, Crew's track record is clear. We're nonpartisan. We were on your show within the past couple of weeks talking about Eddie Bernice Johnson's problems, just for example, and we've certainly been out in front on Charlie Rangel's and Maxine Waters. So we look at both sides.
You actually called for Charlie Rangel to step down.
Yes, we've called on him to resign. We're about right and wrong and not about black or white, Republican or Democrat. And it is flat out wrong for a candidate for the U.S. Senate to be stealing her campaign funds and using them for personal use. And you don't have to just take Cruz's word for it. You have her former campaign aide, a self-described conservative, who's the one who brought this to our attention, who supplied an affidavit for us talking about, for example, the times in 2009 when she used campaign funds to pay her rent to this campaign aide's nephew who bought her house in 2008 when it was about to be foreclosed upon.
Even if the U.S. attorney in Delaware, though, believes, there's cause here for an investigation, that's a tough call for them to be investigating somebody. I mean, it looks political no matter how you slice it.
Well, David Weiss, the U.S. Attorney for Delaware, was in the U.S. Attorney's office during the Bush administration, so he's not, by any stretch of the imagination, an Obama appointee. And whether or not it looks political, it is up to the Department of Justice to keep our elected officials honest, to keep our candidates honest, and this goes to the very heart of our democracy. Everybody has to follow the same rules, Ms. O'Donnell included.